So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the details on these J&M applicators, specifically this 5016. And whenever you get an applicator from Fennig equipment, it's a little bit different than if you get it from another equipment dealership. And I'll show you how some specifics that we do a little bit differently here at Fennig equipment. Of course, on all the applicators, your down pressure knob is right here. And what that does is that adjusts the down pressure of those wings as you're driving through the field. So that's always going to stay here. What Fennig equipment can really customize though is what rate controller we put on these applicators. Whether it's a standard Raven 450 or a John Deere liquid rate controller like what we put on this one, or that Raven ISO controller. We can tie into your ag leader or whatever kind of screen you want to for better managing your liquid rates and your maps. So we can customize that here at Fennig equipment. Of course, these all come with the red ball flow indicators. That is pretty standard, and the rate controller is located right up there. In a little bit, we're going to dig into these Coulters and show you what Fennig equipment does differently with the Coulters as far as a sealer option, the parallel linkage arms, and using that Yetter 2996 Coulter. Also, in a little bit, we'll show you how we calibrate these application units to know 100% that whenever you go to the field, you're putting on the correct rate based on your speed and your pressure to get that exact rate on your corn. So when it comes to customizing an applicator to fit your farm's needs, everything is the same until we get to the Coulter unit. There's several varieties of Coulters and of course several qualities. Here at Fennig equipment, we push the Yetter 2996 parallel linkage Coulter. What that means is whenever the ground gets hard, this knife does not come out of the ground. It's a straight up and straight down Coulter. You get that fertilizer placement below the soil, and it's a rock solid cast design that Yetter has been using for decades. Here at Fennig equipment, we put on the 25 wave Coulter. That way it cuts a wider slot than what your knife is, so that way you get more longevity out of the knife. And also the sidewall seems to crumble a little bit better when you have this 25 wave on the side. Also, a very precise thing that we do whenever we're bolting on these blades is we put a centering tool around this hub. And what that centering tool does is it centers this blade on the hub so that you can get this knife as tight as you can to that Coulter. It centers the blade on this hub so that when it spins perfectly around and you can get this knife adjusted 100%. That's a very crucial setting on these Coulters that no one else in the industry has done. The last piece to it is going to be this Yetter Innkeeper back here. And what that unit does is that seals the slot created by this knife and Coulter to lock in that nitrogen that's placed below the soil. That way the soil cannot gap and you do not lose any nitrogen that you have placed due to evaporation. Those are spring loaded and they're highly adjustable to get them set to right wherever you need them to be. All right, so whenever we talk about the centering tool, this is what we're talking about. This thing is a machine piece where the outside of it is the inside diameter of the blade and the inside of this tool is the outside diameter of the hub. So if you don't put this centering tool on here, there is enough play in all of these holes to where you could tighten it up and it could spin like a football, oblong. What happens when it's spinning oblong is you can never get your knife adjusted properly. Sometimes the knife will hit the blade, other times there'll be a big gap, and that's when you get residue caught in here and everything jams up. But here at Fennig equipment, we have designed this centering tool, and you simply slide it over there, it fits in there snug, and then you can tighten those bolts knowing that that blade is now spinning 100% true. Okay, so now that you have the blade centered, now you can perfectly adjust this knife. The goal here is to have this knife adjusted tight at the bottom, but you want it loose up top. And you can see here it is spinning perfectly, or 100% around the full revolution. If you didn't have that blade centered, it would be tight and hitting in some places, and then there would be a big gap in other places, which is when you get the residue caught in between the blade and the knife. The perfect setting is right there where the knife is almost touching, and then you want a gap up top. That way, if anything does get in, it can get released through this larger area up top. So centering the blade is the most important part of this entire thing, and Fennig Equipment is the only company that has a centering tool and centers the blades. So now that we've got our measurements set out every 30 inches, we put on the Coulter mounting bracket. We mount that onto here, and then we take our Yetter Coulter shank, slide it up through there, and now we're ready to go ahead and lift that unit up through. Put your cotter pin in, and you're ready to tighten and adjust everything perfectly on every 30 inches.